1. So we've talked a little bit about, first of all, about poetry in general and what we've been able to do with it with a podcast and poetry. And now we talked about like if you were out there and you just want to write that book and make it an ebook. There's so many options available for you as an ebook. And one of the options that I find difficult to explain sometimes is the hybrid publishing. So since I do find it hard, I was like, let me introduce you guys to Stephanie Fowler, who owns
Saltwater Media in Berlin, Maryland.
Awesomeness. And she actually just took that as like, we didn't rehearse that. She just jumped right in and did it correctly. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you just toss me a ball and I'll swing for the fences every time.
This is great. We need to do more things together, Steph. And I'm sure
call me. I'm free.
I'm sure the class does not need to know any of this. So let me get back to being professional. I'm sure you guys already know they're kind of bouncy through this presentation. But so I'm going to ask her about 3 or 4 questions. The first question is, Stephanie, how did you get started writing? And it's going to be a 2-part question. I got to make it 2-part because you also have an awesome award that goes with your writing.
Yes, I do. I'm very fortunate for that. So how did I get started writing? I mean, when I knew I wanted to write from the time I was a very young kid. I think I started writing at like 6 years old, writing little poems for my mom. And I was a voracious reader. There's my Nancy Drew books behind me. I was a voracious reader. And I love to, and I don't think it's a hard leap from kids who love to read to also deciding that they want to try their hand at those, the stories that they're reading. And so I just was writing my whole life, went to high school, still was writing all through high school. And then I chose Washington College in Chestertown, Maryland as the place where I wanted to go to college. And the reason I chose Washington College, they have an amazing writing program, but they also have the Sophie Kerr Literary Award. And the Sophie Kerr Prize is the largest undergraduate literary award in the country. And they give it every year to a graduating senior who demonstrates the most promise in a literary endeavor. So I went into college writing a lot of really terrible poetry. I mean, I've looked at some of it not long ago and was like, oh, geez, But while I was at Washington College, I took every writing course, every reading course that I could. I did Shakespeare. I mean, you name it, I took it. And one of the classes that I took was in creative nonfiction. And it opened up a whole new world to me. I just found I finally figured out the way to tell the stories that I've been wanting to say. And creative nonfiction allowed my voice to, talk about the things and say the things I wanted to say in this terribly overwrought wordy poetry. I was able to kind of translate that into like short stories and essays and really kind of develop my voice and get stronger with it. And so it's my senior year, which was in 2001. I put forward a collection of short stories about the Eastern Shore, the Delmarva Peninsula, Maryland, Delaware, Virginia. And I put together a collection of short stories, real people, real places, real stuff that happened. Wrote about a ghost town and a couple of murders and some different things, and put the collection forward. And I was fortunate enough to win the Sophie Kerr Prize in 2001 for my work, for my writing. And just to kind of give you a sense of how big that is, the year that I won the prize, it was $62,000. So the president of the college just hands you a check, for a whole bunch of money. And so that was a pretty, that experience had a great impact on me and has sort of propelled me forward in my career. And I've continued to write. But one of the things that happened was, so the lady who won the Sophie Kerr Prize the year before me, Christine Lincoln, she was a phenomenal fiction writer, phenomenal. And she had a book deal immediately with Random House. She was on Oprah. I mean, she had like the whole enchilada. And, my class is very excited thinking Oprah knows about us and we're all going to have agents and it's going to be amazing. And then I win with stories about the Chesapeake Bay and, no one cares. And so suddenly, I win with these stories about the Eastern Shore and, literally no one cares. So, I had to kind of figure out, like, I tried to ship the project to different agents and presses, big and small, but I just couldn't really get any takers. And so I kind of shelved the project for a while, and then couple of years went by and I decided to kind of knock the dust off of it and decided I was going to publish, going to try again. So again, I added another story to that collection that won the prize. Tried agents, tried editors, tried small presses, big presses, regional presses, niche presses. Couldn't really, everybody just kept telling me no, no, no. And so I felt like the stories had value because they had won this big award. But also no, I couldn't get traditionally published. And so in 2007, I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna have to self-publish. And I had no idea what that meant at all. No idea. I didn't know how that was gonna work at all. So I just started stepping blindly into the process and, tried this and it worked well, tried this and it didn't work so well, made some mistakes, but ultimately I learned a lot in the process of self-publishing. And eventually that led me to wanting to open up my own publishing company where, I try to be the person I wish I had when I was walking through the process. Because when I started to self-publish, I didn't know any of the terms. I didn't know what anything was. I didn't know how any of it worked. I didn't even know the questions that I should be asking. And so I just kind of stepped blindly, but I learned as I kind of, muddled my way through it. I did learn. And so I decided to create a company where a person could come to me and say, hey, this is my manuscript and this is what I want for this project. And then I could just go, okay, well, here's what we have to do. I mean, it's not rocket science. It's not brain surgery. It's just a series of steps that have to happen in a particular order. And so I was like, well, maybe I can be the person I wish I had when I wanted to do this. Someone just to take me by the hand, explain the process, explain how it works, give me some reasonable expectations to have, and get me a quality book on the other end of it. And so that's what we try to do at Saltwater Media. We opened in May of 2013. And we are, 8.5 years later, we are, still going strong and working with authors all over Delmarva and even some further beyond. And it's just been a really great experience to work with creative people every day and bringing their works to life.
Okay, so you covered all the questions.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's perfectly fine.
Oh gosh.
I do have to have one more question because I
Sure.
think you just talked about what traditional publishing is and now what e-publishing is. So can you tell us the difference between traditional publishing, self-publishing, and what you offer?
Sure. So the publishing industry, the traditional publishing industry is sort of what every author dreams and wants it to be. They want to be able to have a publishing company say, we're going to publish your book, and then you sign a contract and they give you money and your book appears in bookstores everywhere. And that's traditional publishing, and that is the dream. And that can happen, and that still happens. I mean, I have friends who are getting their books published traditionally by and there's large presses like Random House and Penguin, and then all the way down to regional presses like Johns Hopkins and different smaller presses. There's even niche presses. I've even talked to a woman recently who's opening up a publishing company that's just on computer and coding, and that is her slice of the pie. That's it. She's not doing a cookbook or a kid's book. I mean, it's all going to be that. So so the traditional publishing route is kind of the brass ring that everybody wants. I'm going to submit my book to a publisher and they're going to take it and they're going to pay me money and it's going to be fine. The thing about traditional, and that's great, but the kind of the thing is that's very hard to get into. And I have friends who have been traditionally published for their first book, and then their second book, they were, right back out the door. So just because your foot is in that door doesn't mean it's going to stay in. And so what happens is there was kind of this birth of was the vanity presses, but we now call it the self-publishing world, where you're not going to be told no. No one's going to tell you no, because the author is then paying to have all of those things that a publishing house would pay for. The author is paying for those to get them to the end market. With hybrid publishing, which is kind of a new emerging field, and it's what my company is trying to potentially move towards. I mean, we have been based on a self-publishing model, but we have been sort of moving towards this hybrid of kind of the two, meaning I don't say yes to every client. Just because a client comes to me with a book, I don't always say yes, even though my company is based on the self-publishing model, which you would think, well, if someone comes to you a book, why do you care what it's about? I also believe that I have to be a good fit for this client, and this client has to be a good fit for us and as a company. And so one of the things you see with the hybrid models is really sort of more of that. I don't say no to I mean, I don't say yes to everyone, but there have been clients that we have definitely said no, or we're not ready, or whatever that might be. So there's a bit more selective in terms of how many clients they take. And then also in the hybridization model, sometimes, the publishing house assumes a little bit more of those fees up front. Some of them are deciding to take some royalties on the back end. So the hybrid market is kind of like in a little bit of flux right now, as we all kind of, we're all trying to figure out what works best for us individually. And so for me personally, my hybridization point of view is that um, I still see myself as predominantly self-publishing. However, we're not taking every client that comes in the door. We're also trying to dedicate more time and trying to push those clients, maybe even do like a little more back end marketing, which is something you don't always see with some other ones. So I think what you're seeing, and especially during COVID, because it became very hard to do marketing and some of those things. And I think what you're seeing with COVID is that people are sort of specializing. Like I was talking to that one lady who was just doing the coding books. I think some people are pulling away from some of the bigger presses and trying to specialize a little bit more. And then also with some of the self-publishing companies, I think you're seeing some of them starting to do a bit more sifting through, because ultimately we need to be producing the best books that we can. And not everybody that comes in the door is coming in the door with something that is going to be marketable. And so those are some tough conversations that you have to have with clients sometimes. And that's something that we're having more and more as we're trying to move from strictly self-publishing into, let's be a little bit more selective. Let's see what kind of authors we want to represent, what kind of authors do we want to push, how do we want to further push them, can we market them in any way. And so those are big questions that we have as we move towards that.
All right. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Can you tell people where they can find out more information about you, your writing career, Saltwater Media, and your podcast?
Oh, thank you. So for me as a writer, you can find me at stephaniefowler.net. My company, Saltwater Media, is saltwatermedia.com. And I'm on all the socials, and my company is also on the socials. And in terms of, what was the last question? I missed it.
Your podcast.
Oh, yes, my podcast. So we have a podcast called So What's Your Story? And you can find that at sowhat'syourstorypodcast.com. We are on a little bit of a break right now. My co-host is out in Ohio. So we're going to hopefully this winter kick back off with some new episodes. So we'll see how that goes.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And now we're going to go on to talk a bit more about, once you get that e-publishing done, what you can do for yourself to make sure that you do a great job of selling the book.